I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and we are going to try to make this one a little bit short because I can feel my voice is getting ready to go. It feels like I've been chewing on razor blades this morning. I think the kids have probably tried to get me sick. My whole house has been sick for the last week, so it's just natural that I'm the last one to get it. But I've got some Starbucks here to soothe my throat, and I've got some questions here, so let's go ahead and get on with the show. And the first question I have today is from Daniel. Daniel says, shooter and spotter communication and terminology. What's the best way to communicate corrections? Well, Daniel, the best way to communicate corrections is however you can clearly and concisely get the idea across to the person that you're working with. There is no real set right way to do it or wrong way to do it. However, I can offer you some suggestions versus what I have found to work in the past. The main thing being, you need to make sure that both you and your spotter, or you and your shooter, if you're acting as the spotter, understand the units of measure that you are communicating in. If you are comfortable with yards, make sure you stick with yards. If both of your setups are set in mils, then stick with mils. Both of your setups are in minutes of angle, stick with minutes of angle. It's very, very disconcerting to change units in the middle of what you're doing. So you don't want to be calling corrections in tenths of a mil and then all of a sudden switch over to clicks or some nonsense like that. Again, you don't want to be calling ranges in yards and then switch to meters, because there is a difference. And when you get into extended ranges, the difference becomes greater. So make sure you stick to what you originally plan on using. Now, as far as clicks or MOA or mils, depending upon your setup is going to depend on which one you go with. If you go with MOA or mils, I would recommend never, ever, ever using clicks. Clicks just really don't make sense because you are locking the shooter in to making the correction the way you want him to make the correction. If I'm on a gun and my spotter calls come up 3 clicks, well, if I was on a MOA system with MOA reticle, MOA turrets, then basically I'm going to either have to dial or I'm going to have to do the conversion in my head and realize, okay, if he says come up 3 clicks, that's 3/4 MOA, and then figure out where it is in my reticle I need to hold. Whereas if he just said come up 3 MOA or 3/4 MOA or come up an MOA, then I know I can either dial or I can look through my scope. It's very fast, it's very efficient. Now we run into one of the reasons that I don't like MOA, and I definitely don't like mixed value scopes where you have maybe a mil reticle and MOA turrets, because it's very easy for a spotter to look through his glass and you fire a shot and you miss. It's very easy for him to say half a mil right, half a mil up. Well, then you can either dial or you can look through your reticle and make the adjustment and fire again. It's very quick, very easy. Now, one thing that really helps a whole lot for both spotter and shooter is you need to make sure you communicate when you're both on the glass and when you're ready to go. What I will generally say is something like, if I'm the spotter, I'll say, on scope or on target. Shooter will say, he's on target or on glass or ready. And then I'll either say fire, or if we're doing more law enforcement type stuff, I may say green light. Green light basically gives the shooter permission to fire. Whenever he is ready, he can fire the shot. If you say fire, it's kind of a more immediate thing. And none of these are set in stone. Send it is another common one that you'll hear, and that's just, the spotter telling the shooter that everything is ready, everything is good to go. He's ready to go. So the spotter will get on glass, he'll indicate that he's on glass. The shooter will get on the target and indicate that he is ready, either on target or ready or something of that nature. Spotter can then say send it, and then the only thing that comes from the shooter is the shot out of the rifle. And then after that, of course, the spotter is going to watch, and if the spotter doesn't see anything, then doesn't see splash, doesn't see trace, nothing. What I like to say as a spotter is no impact, no idea. That means I didn't see any effects on the target and I have no clue which direction it went. It's really simple. No impact, no idea. We don't have to, argue back and forth. That tells the shooter that I have no corrections for him. I don't know where the shot went to. So he then has to decide, did he blow the shot? Did he have his, turrets off? Something like that. So the shooter knows there's no help that I can give him at that point. If he fires and he misses, ideally I'm spotting with either a rifle scope or I'm spotting with a field spotter that actually has a reticle in it, so I can measure the miss and I can give him a correction. And we always correct the direction we want the shot to go. So if he misses half a mil right and half a mil low, then I'm going to say left half mil, up half mil. So he's going to come left half a mil and up half a mil. We don't tell him where the shot went to. We tell him what the correction is, because the spotter is basically directing the shooter onto the target. It's the same thing like when you're calling corrections with artillery. You're going to call the direction. You want them to move the shot, to move where the actual round is impacting. So that, again, real simple way to get them over, get them back on the target, and have them send another shot. But really, again, it's going to be you working with your partner and getting a set communication down. And the more often you do it, the more it will flow. The key thing is you want to be clear and concise. You don't want to draw things out. You don't want to add a whole lot to it. And don't waffle around on stuff. Look through the scope, make a call, give your shooter that information, and let him get on target. Especially when you are trying to shoot a long-range target and your wind is changing up, you want to make sure that you're getting those calls rapidly. You want to get the next shot in the air as quickly as possible. That way you have the greatest possibility of getting that shot downrange with the same conditions that the previous shot fired. Our gold standard is first round hits, but in most situations in the real world, a second round hit is going to still get the job done. So you want to make sure that you get right on with that second round hit. Now, calling the wind is a really, really personal kind of thing. But there are some tricks to communicating to your shooter where you want him to put his reticle. I really suggest holding for wind and not dialing for wind, because while the shooter and spotter are on the line, the wind can change in the middle of the process. Now, where you tell him to put the reticle is very similar to where you tell him to adjust. But if you tell him something, for instance, say you have a right to left wind and you're looking at it and it's not really enough that you're going to want to take an aggressive wind hold on it. Maybe you just want him to favor the edge of the target. If you tell him favor right or hold right edge, then he's just going to go on the right edge of the target. He's not going to hold off the target because you don't think it's, that aggressive a wind. If you want him to hold off the target, then give him an actual mil value. If he's using a mil reticle, give him an MOA value if he's using an MOA reticle. So if it's kicking up there quite a bit, tell him hold right half mil, and that will usually, unless you've coordinated ahead of time, if you tell him hold right half mil, then he's going to hold a half mil to the center of the target. Now if you tell him hold half mil right edge, then he's going to hold a half mil off the right edge of the target. And again, none of these are set in stone. It's just something to communicate with your shooter and have a good idea of, hey, this is what we're going to do. And it's all something you want to talk about beforehand. You don't want to go out to a team match and try to figure out your communication on the fly. If you are a pair that work together on a regular basis, then you want to familiarize yourself with the ballistic tables of the other shooter's rifle. Because if you are working in a team environment, say you're shooting like one of the DM matches down at Woody's, your partner will pretty much be calling all the corrections for the targets for you, or all the dope for each one of the different targets. That is the fastest way to do it because the shooter can stay on the gun, and ideally, if you're comfortable with holding, you don't even have to come off the gun to dial. You can just look through your reticle and transition to the next target, get your hold, and send it, and really clean those stages quickly. So give your spotter the dope that you need for all your targets and let him call it for you. And then lastly, we have target number and how to get to the different targets. Use terrain features to get you on the targets. If you have a target that is, out in the middle of a field, figure out some terrain feature that you can get to, or get with your shooter and say, we're going to call this target 1, we're going to call this target 2, we're going to call this target 3. So make sure you both know where the targets are at, because again, in a team match, you don't want the shooter to have to look at anything other than his sight picture through the scope. You want him to be able to get to the different targets very quickly. And spotters, make sure your shooter is on the right revolution of his scope. Make sure that when he's getting down there that he's starting at 0 or starting with the correct dope. And when you get done shooting and he's getting ready to clear the line, make sure you remind him to put that scope back on 0. Dial that turret back to 0. It's really easy for the shooter to be amped up and come off the line and forget that turret, and then he's going to be screwed for the next stage. Shooters, it's your responsibility to keep that in mind, but your spotter is there to back you up. So make sure he keeps that in mind. So that, I hope, gives you some ideas on how to work on your communication with your partner. Our next question comes from Chris, and Chris asks, what do you look for when purchasing a scope for a competitive advantage? Well, Chris, I assume you're talking about a scope for precision rifle type matches or precision rifle series type matches, and really there are a ton of scopes out there, but the couple of cardinal features that I look for is, first of all, I want the reticle and the turret to match. I will generally go for a mil-based reticle, and I want turrets that are graduated in 1/10 of a mil. I then look for the magnification range. The magnification range, I want somewhere around the 5 to 20 power. Now, if it's a 3 to 17 or a 3 to 15, that doesn't totally discount it, but I prefer something in the 5 to 20 power. I find that power over 20 is really getting into an area that I don't use very often. The Beast that we shoot that's still on the 260 is a 5 to 25, and I do find myself up into that 25 occasionally. If I'm shooting a 200-yard cold bore, I will usually be at that 25 power just to give me the clearest, most refined sight picture that I can get. But that's probably about the only time I'll use that. On the Bushnell XRS, that goes up to 30 power on the top end, and very seldom will I actually be at that 30 power because you lose some crispness in that sight picture. It is not razor sharp at that top end. Now, the Night Force Beast is very clear at 25 power, so it is really a usable 25. But when you start to introduce Mirage, or you start to introduce multiple target engagements where they're all over the field, then really you want to back that power down so you can get from target to target in a more efficient manner. So that's about where I like on the magnification range. Scope tube diameter, main tube diameter, I really don't care. Anywhere from 30 to 34 is going to be fine because you're going to get enough elevation. I want to make sure that I have enough elevation in the system that without a 20 MOA base, I could still get out to 1,000+ yards depending on the caliber that I'm shooting. Assuming, again, that we're looking at a PRS type rifle, I want to be able to get to 12 to 13 by dialing. I don't want to have to dial and then hold. to get that long range. Usually you're not going to have targets beyond 1,300 yards. If you do, it may be one or two, and it may be just one of those kind of tiebreaker stages where they're really trying to open the field up. But if it can get to 1,000 yards by dialing, then you're going to be good to go. If not, then it's pretty easy to throw an incline base or an incline mount on your scope and get a little bit of extra distance. Now the turrets, I like locking turrets, but not having locking turrets is not a limiting factor. This scope right here, the SWFA SS 5-20, does not have locking turrets, but the turrets have enough tension in them that I'm not worried about just brushing it and rolling the turrets. I mean, really, I can rub my hand back and forth here and not roll the turrets. So pulling it in and out of gun bag or slinging it on my back, I'm not going to end up with the turrets one revolution off. That brings us to another one. I like revolution indicators, but all scopes have some kind of markings on them to tell you what kind of rev you're on. It may just be a scale on it that you can mark off, or you can draw in your data book a picture of what the scale looks like when the turret is on 0. So you should be able to look at your turret and know what rev you're on. So again, not a totally discounting feature. And those are about the few features that I really desire on a competition scope. The type of reticle, as long as it is a mill reticle, doesn't really get me all wrapped up. Here lately, I have really been enjoying using the Horus H59 reticle, and I was not a big Horus fan to begin with. That reticle is still a little bit busy for me, but I think it is a really good combination of features. The Vortex EBR2 reticle is also a really great reticle, but you can only get that reticle in Vortex scopes. The advantage of the Horus H59 reticle is you can get them in a wide variety of different scopes out there. The US Optics scope that we have that I'm getting ready to throw on this rifle, in fact, has an H59 reticle in it, as do several of the other scopes that we have on other rifles from various manufacturers. So it's nice to have one reticle across several different scope types. But if you're looking at one scope for one rifle, or one scope to use on several rifles, it really doesn't make a great big difference as long as the reticle is clear, it's easy to see the markings on it, and I really prefer to have some kind of windage markings off to the side of the lower part of the vertical stadia line. So the line that comes down from the center of your crosshair, I like to have markings out to the side. So if I run into a speed stage where I need to hold for elevation and windage, then I can do so without touching my turrets. And really, that's about it. Has to track true, has to have a good reputation. Glass clarity is kind of down there because glass clarity is not going to make the difference between me making a hit or not. Tracking reliability is going to make the difference between me making a hit or not. Ease of use of the reticle will make the difference between me making a hit or not. So everybody gets wrapped around about how clear is the glass, how clear is the glass. That is really not the highest bullet point for me in scopes. Tracking and the easy use of the reticle are. So I hope that gives you an idea of some of the things that I look at for competition rifle scopes. Our next question is from Robert. Robert asks, everyone had 308 brass tools and how to resize 6.5 or 6mm. Also, can you rechamber a 260 into 6.5 Creed? I'm not really sure about what we're talking about in the first part of the question, but I'm guessing you're asking how to resize 308 brass into 6.5 or 6mm. And in most of the cases, it's just a matter of running the 308 brass through the press. If we're talking about, say, resizing to 260 or resizing to 243 or something like that. It's just running the brass through the press, and then you may have to do some neck preparation, probably neck turning, to make sure that the neck is the appropriate diameter for your chamber. And there may be some trimming in there too. Most likely there will be some trimming in there too. So you'll have to trim the cases to length, and you'll have to turn the necks to get them to the right thickness to hold the bullet and to fit in your chamber. As far as beyond that, it's really going to depend upon which specific 6.5 or 6mm cartridge you're trying to convert that brass into. Since we have a 6.5 gas gun sitting here, I am probably going to be trying to reform some 308 brass into 6.5 Creedmoor brass over the next couple of weeks. That way I can shoot that brass through this rifle, and if I lose it on a stage, it's not a big deal. It's gone. I don't really have to worry about it. Right now, I just tried to order some Hornady 6.5 Creedmoor brass, and Midway is out of stock on it, and they were out of stock in like 2 days. I saw the notification in my email. I didn't order it right away, went there later. It was already out of stock. So the ability to resize the massive amount of 308 brass that I have sitting here into 6.5 Creedmoor is definitely an option that I want to have. And we'll let you guys know how that goes going forward. Now the second part of your question, can you rechamber a 260 into a 6.5 Creedmoor? Well, yes you can. 260 and 6.5 Creedmoor use the same bolt face, the same cartridge head, and they're basically the same overall length cartridge. There's a little bit of difference there, but they're very close. The first question I would have to ask is, why would you want to rechamber a 260 into a 6.5 Creedmoor? I would not waste the money on it until I burned a barrel out, and then if I just really had a burning desire to go 6.5 Creed, then I would go that route. Now, if you really, really want to convert a 260 barrel that you already have chambered and installed on a rifle to 6.5 Creedmoor, you can take it to a gunsmith and they can do what's called setting back the barrel. They're basically going to cut the chamber off. They're going to recut the barrel tenon to fit in the receiver, and then they're going to recut the chamber with a 6.5 Creedmoor reamer instead of a 260 reamer. And that's totally possible to do as long as you have enough meat left in the chamber area of your barrel. So it's going to depend upon your barrel profile, but that's doable. I wouldn't advise it. I just burn that 260 barrel out to begin with. You're not talking about a massive amount of barrel life on it. And then when you rebarrel it, you can go ahead and have it rebarreled in 6.5 Creedmoor if that's your choice. Our next question comes from Tyler, and Tyler asks, precision rifle courses, semi-auto or bolt action? Well, Tyler, it's really going to depend upon what you want to get out of a precision rifle course. Now, if you usually shoot a semi-auto, take the semi-auto. If you usually shoot a bolt action, take the bolt action. If you are mostly a bolt action shooter and you're comfortable with a bolt action and you want to get more comfortable with a semi-auto, or you're having problems shooting a semi-auto, then it may be a good idea to take the semi-auto and have a professional instructor help you out with the issues that you're having. Conversely, if you usually shoot a semi-auto and you want to get some tips on running a bolt gun, then take the bolt gun. So look at it and decide what it is that you want to get out of the class, what kind of skills you're trying to build, and go that route. As far as competitions, then we have to step back and look at things. For me, as a shooter, I find it easier to shoot bolt guns to a high degree of accuracy versus their semi-automatic cousins. I am still kind of struggling to get the mechanical accuracy out of semi-auto rifles. I have gotten better again in the last couple of months since I have really dedicated myself to shooting the semi-auto, but it still is a little bit of a struggle for me. In times past, I would go out and I would shoot a semi-auto and I would not get the accuracy I would think that the rifle was capable of, and so I'd go, reach back into the gun bag and I'd grab bolt action that I knew was a very accurate rifle that I could shoot accurately, and I would spend the rest of the day shooting the bolt action because I knew I could shoot it well. That old ego thing creeped back in, and we like to do the things that we do well. We don't like to do the things that we don't do well. So it's been a struggle for me over the last couple of months to force myself to shoot rifles that I don't shoot well, to build myself up as a shooter. So again, it's going to depend upon what you want to get out of it. If you want the professional instruction, or If it's something where you're trying to learn a different skill or a different application for a rifle and you want to go there with a rifle that you're already very comfortable with. Now, I will say this, when you go to a class, make sure whatever you take is dead reliable. Make sure that you're not going to have any mechanical problems with it. Make sure that it's zeroed and it is ready to go with the ammunition that you're taking to the class. Because nothing will cause greater problems than a student showing up with a gun with all kinds of mechanical issues, or a gun that they have absolutely no idea how to do the basic functions on it. We wouldn't expect you to show up at a precision rifle class and already be an expert rifle shooter, especially if you're talking about a basic precision rifle class. But you should show up knowing the features of your rifle and knowing the basic operation of your rifle. That way the instructor can concentrate on showing you how to apply the rifle to the shooting problem in the most efficient way possible. So I hope that makes sense. Our last question comes from Jackson, and Jackson asks, gathering dope on a new rifle. Seems like everyone is making comments on these last few weeks, and I would like to see what you would do. Where do ballistic calculators fit in, and how do you adjust data that you get from soft data? Well, Jackson, for my purposes, what I will generally do is first take the rifle out to the 100-yard range. And while I am zeroing it, I will shoot it over a chronograph and I will get my velocity data from the rifle. I really love the magnetospeed chronograph. It makes it easy to strap it on and shoot it, but there is one little caveat to using the magnetospeed when you're zeroing out the scope. I have seen in most barrels the magnetospeed does not cause a change in point of impact on the rifle. I have seen a couple that we have now that do have, they exhibit some really strange characteristics when I put the magnetospeed on. Sarah's rifle, for instance, I think part of it may have to do with the big Mongo JP brake on it. When I put the magnetospeed on that rifle, it shoots horribly. It won't group for anything. But when I turn around and say put the magnetospeed on this rifle, it really doesn't open up group sizes much at all, and it still shoots the same point of impact. I may have a slight difference in the actual size of the group, but the point of impact is the same. The center of that shot group is the same, whether I have the magnetospeed on or not. But I will shoot the rifle with the magnetospeed and get the velocity data that I need. I'll then take my height over bore and all my other information that we discussed when we covered how to set up a gun profile in the Kestrel, and I'll put that information in the Kestrel. Once I have the gun data in the Kestrel and compare that to the environmental data that it's giving me, I will then shoot the solutions that the Kestrel gives me at varying yard ranges, and I will compare that. And here, the last couple of guns that I've done that with, the Kestrel has been absolutely dead on. I haven't had to make any corrections. In fact, when we got the Accuracy International AT and the proof barrel together to go out to the Oregon Sniper Challenge, all I did was shoot that rifle at 100 yards to get the data I was going to use. I then shot confirmations at varying different yard ranges, and then I rolled with that. Went all the way out to Oregon, was in the high desert, read the information right off the Kestrel, and that information was good enough to get me a 4th place finish. I had no problem making hits to intermediate ranges. Now, none of the stuff we shot out there was true long range, but I was getting solid hits on difficult targets at intermediate ranges, so I know the data was good to go. So that's really how I've been doing it here lately. Now, if you don't have access to a Kestrel, or you don't have access to ballistic information or a chronograph, then what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go out and you're going to need to shoot each and every yard line. You'll start out with a ballistic calculator like JBM Ballistics or one of the different iPhone or Android ballistic apps, and then you're going to input the data you get on that ballistic curve to all the targets that you've shot. And the key thing is you need to get as close as possible to the environmental data that you had on the day that you shot that. And when you put all that information in the calculator can then back in to the rest of your ballistic information, your muzzle velocity, all that fun stuff. You'll still need to know ballistic coefficient of your bullet, and all the other gun data information, but you can back into that muzzle velocity. And if you've done your job and you've been as accurate as possible in the measurements and as accurate as possible in the shooting, then you can be good to go. The one thing that I don't really like about doing it that way is that doesn't take into effect the optic. If you have an optic that maybe is not tracking exactly to where a mil on the optic is a mil in real life, that can throw some issues in there, and you may have to do a little bit of goofing around to get things to track correctly. But that is one way to do it without actually using a chronograph, without all the fancy stuff like the Kestrel. You can do it with an iPhone, or you can do it on your computer with JBM Ballistics, which is a free website application and is a really, really good resource for shooters that are on a shoestring budget. And we'll leave a link to JBM Ballistics down in the description below. But those are some options to go about getting dope on a brand new rifle. You're still going to have to go out and you're still going to have to shoot it at as many varying yard ranges as you can to make sure what you're seeing in the soft dope is actually correlating to what the rifle does in the real world. But it's really not that difficult, and with as accurate as the ballistic equations have been getting and as accurate as the data has been getting that we get from these bullets, we can really get into some accurate ballistic solutions very quickly. Well, that's all we have for this Mail Call Mondays. I can feel my voice is just getting ready to go, so we timed this just about right. Before we go, I want to mention that we just got done with the review of the Short Action Precision Run and Gun Bag, and that is up on our website, and again, we'll leave a link down below to that. A really great bag if you guys are looking for a rear bag. It has a ton of features and works great for precision rifle series style competition. It's not just for the rear of the rifle. You can strap it on the front. You can use it for barricade shooting. A lot of cool stuff, and I really want to thank Short Action Precision for sending this bag out to us to check out. So make sure you go check out the review, and again, we'll leave a link to that below. If you like this show, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. And until next time, get out and shoot.